Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in Arkansas today, joined by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing last generation meta avatars with our hands tracked by the headset's cameras and using the built in microphones. We're live here on YouTube on October 24th, wearing Quest 3 headsets, and we've got tablets in front of us so we can see live comments and interact with our audience. And I want to give a personal thank you to our patrons, including Mike Manzano, HoloNet, Smash Drums developer Podum, as well as XR developer News, for supporting us directly. You can become a member or patron at uploadvr.com, and thank you to our YouTube members as well for supporting the work we do as journalists to bring you the latest information, verified as much as possible by our eyes and ears. David, what do we have today?
Yeah, so I think, as many of the comments are alluding to, the biggest news this week was, of course, Batman Arkham Shadow's release, but that was covered on the Gamescast, and this is VR Download, where we talk about hardware and technology. So we won't be talking about that today. We have 4 or so sections today. The first will just be some general stories. First, Gracia, the Gaussian splatting platform, has added dynamic Gaussian splats. So they're moving volumetric scenes on PC VR, and we really recommend you go and try that out because it's a real taste of the future. We then talk about the fact that Bigscreen claims that Beyond is now shipping within 1 day of ordering, which is a remarkable feat given that that's a custom fit headset. Then we'll have our meta section. We'll talk about the Meta Interaction SDK getting support for Unreal Engine and for non-meta headsets in the Unity version. We will talk about Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth showing that photo where he's holding a wide field of view prototype headset from Reality Labs research. And we'll talk about field of view in general and how it's kind of one of the key aspects of headsets for immersion. We'll then talk about the news that Meta Ray-Ban glasses are the top-selling product in many Ray-Ban stores, so that shows that demand is strong for smart glasses. We will then talk about Quest 4. We just had Quest 3S announced, but we may have a little tease of a possible features coming to Quest 4 potentially. We'll talk about the details of that when we get into it. We'll then have an NBA section. Strange, but there is NBA news from both Meta and Apple this week. And that will transition us then into our final section about Apple, where we talk about Vimeo getting support for Apple Spatial videos and bringing an app to Vision Pro, a Vimeo app on Vision Pro. And we will finish off by talking about what's probably the most controversial news of this week, which we've seen be very badly reported by some other outlets and, of course, by social media, where news gets turned into headlines, which gets turned into sound bites, which don't resemble the original news at all. And that is, of course, the report that suggests that Apple could stop Vision Pro production by the end of this year. And we're going to explain what that really means, because it's probably not what you may have seen on social media.
Yeah, we've just had the Walkabout Mini Golf 8-bit layer course publish out there at this very minute, coinciding with our show here today. We'll cover that like Batman. I see all the people talking about playing Batman this week. We had a live stream earlier this week with Don Hopper going through the first hour or two there, as well as our big review. Obviously, Meta dropped that game early on everyone, and we had our review ready to go, which was pretty awesome. And yeah, you can go check that out at uploadvr.com, but we will cover that on Tuesday with Don Hopper there on VR Gamescast. As always, we cover the wider technology and hardware news here on the show with David Heaney, and we have a very big show today. That first one is a very interesting one because there's a long path to be laid ahead for moving volumetric scenes. You can actually walk around. This I see recycled in our comments today. Thank you for tuning in, Biggs, as well as Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop out there, whose comments we often read out. So Guy sometimes even grates against that for us reading out his comments, but he's a big developer in the community that a lot of people know. So we always appreciate when he tunes in, and yeah, we'll probably do that today. So choose your words carefully, Guy. All right, why don't we break down this first one for us, David?
Sure. So Gaussian splatting is this kind of very interesting, relatively new technology that can allow representing photorealistic volumetric scenes. So these aren't just 3D photos or videos. When we mean volumetric, we mean you can move your head around and walk around, a truly sixed off volumetric scene. And we've seen that in Meta's Hyperscape demo, the Horizon Hyperscape that they launched at Connect. We've seen other companies do that. For example, Vario Teleport uses Gaussian splatting. And of course, Gracia was the one we always talked about because it's been available standalone on Quest 3 for months now. And they also have a PC VR version on Steam. And so the news here today is that Gracia have figured out dynamic Gaussian splats, so moving volumetric scenes. What would you even call these? Volumetric videos, volumetric clips. The naming isn't important. The point is that in these three scenes, they're short scenes, the subjects are actually moving. So the one you see in this screenshot here is Spinning Dancer, and it's a 29-second clip, which the name gives away what it is. It's a dancer spinning. There's another one called Family Moment. There's another 8-second one called Shadow Boxing, where it's, as you expect, I think, a UFC fighter doing a little bit of boxing. And so this is still very early, right? These are short clips, and we need to point out that even then, these are very large files. So this 29-second clip is a 9 gigabyte file, which equates to roughly 300 megabytes per second. And if you know that 1 megabyte is equal to 8 megabits, that means that if you were to hypothetically wanting to stream this on an internet connection, that's not something they do offer, but hypothetically, that would take a 2.4 gigabit internet connection. So these are enormous files needed to produce these volumetric moving scenes, but they do exist now. The other side of it is in production. These are captured using expensive 3D capture studios, and it takes 6 minutes to train a single frame on AWS. Train being the kind of neural equivalent of rendering in traditional video content. So that means that it takes weeks of total AWS compute time per minute of this kind of content. And that can be parallelized, but it just goes to show that there is a significant cost and time involved in producing this. Is still the early days, but you can imagine that one day down the line, this is going to be used to provide the kind of immersive content that goes beyond the spatial and immersive video we talk about today. That's just 3D and sometimes 180 degrees, but not actually volumetric. So early days. I would recommend trying this out, right? Just go to Steam, download Gracia. If you have a PC VR setup, that can be a Quest headset on Steam Link or AirLink or virtual desktop, or it can be a native PC VR headset via DisplayPort or whatever. Go and try this out. They're short clips, they're large files, but it's a tantalizing glimpse of the future of immersive content.
Yeah, so I appreciate the context of LL's comment here saying, meanwhile, Netflix is streaming 4K at about 20 megabits a second or around that margin. And you think about the gap there between holodeck experiences like this, right? If you remember all those holodeck episodes from Star Trek, there were courtroom recreation scenes where they had people's different version of events all produced, like reproduced inside the holodeck. You basically need this technology to kind of do that. And the bandwidth requirements are just ridiculous. Well, we know that they're going to try to close the gap between what we're seeing here and what's possible today. But how much sort of, I don't know, AI hallucination is required to fill in those gaps? Do we have any kind of, I don't know, a path to making sure that everything we see in these things is pixel perfect accurate and not hallucinated, or does that happen? I don't know. Do you have any insight into that, David? Like what I'm getting at?
I mean, a lot of this technique essentially is, neural compression, right? So you are trying to get this relatively sparse, still quite dense in this case, because you're talking about a capture studio with a bunch of cameras, but the goal is to get relatively sparse capture. Eventually, they want this to be just 20 GoPros in a circle into, files that you can view from any angle. So there does need to be some kind of extrapolation there, but they do hope that over time they can, they claim in the next year or so they're going to get an order of magnitude improvement in the compression here, and then that brings it down to a 240 megabit connection that you would need to stream something like this. And they say there are research papers already out there that demonstrate this with some quality loss, and they're hoping they can do that without quality loss in future. So we want to be clear, this is still super early stuff, but this is a really promising technology. And right now, in the same way that LLMs were what made chatbots possible in a lot of the current usages of text-based and voice-based AI. For volumetric content like this, it looks like the magic sauce here is going to be Gaussian splatting, and we're still only seeing the starts of static Gaussian splats. So it's really interesting that we've now seen the very first implementations of dynamic Gaussian splats that are being able to be rendered in real time on a PCVR system.
Yeah, two sort of like little notes here before we move on, because I love the Afro Badger's comment here saying my friend just got 2 gigabit up down home circuit in the UK. My goodness. One of the things that, like, I asked David in his article here to spell out megabytes and gigabits, because even when I've talked to like my internet installer that comes to put the internet into my house, or I've called up the internet service provider to try to clarify what's my home internet connection speeds, those people will often mix up gigabit or the bit versus byte transference there, and everyone at home understands bytes on their hard drive and how much space that takes up, but then the internet service provider communicates in this other rate that's so confusing to people.
Yeah,
And
no,
so
that's arguably very true, right? It's like,
tease those apart for us. Sorry, what was that, David?
sorry, I was just going to say that is very true, right? The only time that most average consumers ever hear the concept of a megabit is internet speeds, and it sounds better, right? Because it's 8 times. They would much rather say you're getting an 800 megabit per second connection than a 100 megabyte per second. It's obviously just for typical marketing, right? As Guy Godin in our comments is saying, they're always going to use that because it shows a bigger number.
Yeah, and so I'm appreciating that our commenters here are in the same boat as us, as trying to be really careful there about the delineation. I want to talk about, I think we got to talk about Guy's comment, though, and I won't read it out directly, but he suggests that this technology in particular is probably ideal for adult content. And that makes a lot of sense, because one of the things is this was studio captured content, right? So that's kind of uncomfortable for some of our audience to think about, but it does seem to be a matchup there between, you've got a studio able to actually capture people that you bring in for some kind of acting scenario, and the lineup there between how immersive that's going to feel for viewers to see.
Yeah, I mean, let's not beat around the bush. That is absolutely going to be a huge use case for this technology in the long term, and it already is for 180-degree 3D video, right? There are a lot of people who are using that today. I know someone who recently told me they got a Quest 3, and I was like, oh, great. Do you want to play some games on it? And he says, games? That's not what I use it for. And he explained that he used it for exactly that purpose. And, I mean, I think we don't talk about it, and Meta's not going to promote it, but it certainly is going to be one of those use cases that probably more people than we expect are using these headsets for.
Yeah, I'm appreciative that David used the phrase that our commenters called out, which is just right on the nose here. And I met with one of our members in Walkout Mini Golf at one point, and I asked them what they like. If do they watch 180-degree video? And they're like, oh yeah, I do. Kind, because I was expecting NBA or whatever, or one of the other types of 180-degree content, and of course they were like, no, it's adult content, and I'm like, oh yeah, of course, right? That is a major use case of VR. But yeah, it's think about that over the long term. Go back to Betamax versus VHS, and Blu-ray versus HD DVD. There is a long history there that even internet streaming, right, taking off because of that use case that no one wants to talk about, but pretty much everyone uses in one way, shape, or form. I think it's time to move on to Bigscreen here. Any comment you want to respond to before we do that?
No, there's another thing I wanted to bring up about this just before we move on. We were talking still about the data requirements here. There's another way to do this, of course. In the same way that the other challenge is that they need to get this running on standalone, you could just forego all of that kind of optimization and the bandwidth optimization and just render these in the cloud on a GPU, and then stream it in the same way that you would do other cloud VR streaming, right? So the files and the rendering would be done on an AWS GPU, and then you just stream the actual first-person view like you would if you're using virtual desktop with Shadow PC or Plutosphere back in the day. That is a solution that they're looking into here. So we don't even have to actually do all this. I expect that probably is going to be the long-term solution for this, right? Especially if you want to do larger and more dynamic scenes than just having one person. All of these scenes are just a single person or three people, I think, standing there. If you want to have a background, if you want to have all this stuff. And that's actually, as far as we can tell, how Horizon Hyperscape works. Now, I can't test this myself. I'm not in the US, but some people have said they've had success with a VPN. I didn't when I tried, but it looks to be like that's how Horizon Hyperscape works, using Meta's Avalanche technology. So that could be the long-term solution here.
Yeah, I appreciate our commenters thinking about all this. I remember I showed my dad Gear VR back in the day, and just to try to get him, that was the headset of the time that I had to put on his head and give him a demo, and he was, you know, instantly clicked for him the killer use case for VR, just like commenters out there know what's up. So let's move on to Bigscreen saying that the Beyond is now shipping within 1 day of ordering. This is, of course, the startup that everyone knows as Co-Watching in VR, the company that was there from the beginning doing co-watching in VR. They recognized co-watching as VR's killer use case, and then they were more or less denied the ability to sell movies and or rentals without giving a 30% cut to Meta on the Meta store, which, we've got a lot of commentary in the audience to talk about right or wrong of that, who's in the right, who's in the wrong. But that is the history before Bigscreen actually started shipping this hardware. So what's the significance of this particular achievement, David?
The significance here is that this is a custom fit headset, right? When you order this thing, you need to have an iPhone because you do a 3D face scan. And from that scan, they build your headset with the lenses fixed to be the distance between your eyes, your IPD, your interpupillary distance. And then that can't be adjusted, right? You can't resell this to anyone who doesn't have your exact IPD, or at least not ethically. If you could and just not tell them that, but that wouldn't be very ethical. The other thing is that they actually give you a face pad, a facial interface that's molded to the shape of your face based on this face scan as well. So that has some huge advantages. That's why Beyond is able to be, or one of the reasons why Beyond is able to be the lightest and smallest VR headset on the market. But of course, as I just alluded to, the other disadvantage there is you can't share it with family and friends, at least not practically. And there's obviously a huge resale problem there. And we'll have to see what Bigscreen does in Gen 2. Are they going to have a trade-in program for this? Because otherwise, you either have to have some sort of system where you match buyers of one IPD with sellers of the exact same IPD. And that seems like it would be quite complicated over time. So yeah, this is a remarkable feat, though, to be clear, that they can now say, according to them, that within 1 day, 24 hours of you doing that face scan, they are shipping the headset. So they're literally, in a matter of hours, doing this assembly and face pad molding and getting it sent off to you. This is remarkable because a year ago, this was months, right? It took months from ordering this thing to getting it. And a few weeks ago, they said that they got it down to 1 week. Before that, it was 1 month, and now 1 day. And, if you're someone who was on the fence about this but didn't want to wait for months after buying it, then this might change your mind. I wonder, though, at what point are we going to get a Gen 2 of this? The obvious thing to do in a Gen 2 would be to add inside-out tracking, so then you don't need the base stations anymore. We'll have to see if that is their plan or not.
Yeah, they're mentioning that the prescription lenses still take a couple weeks to ship. And if anyone from Bigscreen is out there watching us today, obviously answer any questions if you can of our commenters. They sent me the audio strap a little while ago, so I do have the audio strap back at home to assess. It's a really, really interesting piece of hardware to feel this full kit in your hand, right? It's just this tiny little headset with this tiny little metal connector to the little itty bitty off-ear pads that provide you your audio solution. And when you take it all together, this thing feels like it's from the future. The question is, how does it feel on most faces? How does it, there's a lot of minute differences between various IPDs. I see our commenters pointing out that, yeah, Bigscreen develops a whole range of IPD sizes to ship out specifically for your space. Like you mentioned it yourself on just, you've got to trade. If you want to sell the thing, you've got to trade it with someone who has the same face shape and IPD distance as you. And one of my difficulties is my IPD is irregular. So on the Apple Vision Pro, for example, the the mechanized IPD adjustment on the Apple Vision Pro will adjust to put each lens directly in front of my eye. That's not the same that's possible with this pre-built, custom fitted for your face shape. So if the if your IPD is even maybe a half a millimeter or like 2 millimeters or 1 millimeter off from the design that they send you, if one of the two eyes is off, it can have a dramatic effect on your overall experience. And that's one of the things I'm struggling with as I try to assess this product as a whole thing.
Yeah.
But for that on Upload VR in the weeks ahead as we try to get through all our major news. Is there anything else you want to talk about on this before we move on to our meta section?
We have some people in the comments saying, I hope that Bigscreen Beyond 2 has adjustable IPD. I guess the problem there is that the whole point of the product is that it doesn't, right? That's what it is. If you add an IPD mechanism, lens separation adjustment, that adds size and weight, and then it's no longer 127 grams and tiny, right? The whole point of the product is that they've made this bet on a completely custom fit. And yeah, it's right. Commenters are right to point out they don't literally assemble it for your IPD. They obviously use common manufacturing techniques of having these different IPDs ready. I imagine they're probably quite efficient in terms of having some of this come in just in time, but they're not literally obviously building it. Customizing it for different asymmetric IPDs, as you say, if you have one eye that's further out from the center of your face than the other, would be a way to improve that fit. But then that would trade off against cost and shipping time again, which is a big challenge there. And we'll have to see how they do want to address that in a future version of the product. But to people saying that they hope it's adjustable, I mean, then it wouldn't be Bigscreen Beyond, right? It would start getting bigger and start get closer to other headsets.
Yeah, to be clear, the people at Bigscreen made a very let's say bold choice to focus on this design and these trade-offs, right? If you go, we'll get into this Meta section later as we talk about the trade-offs that Meta talks about in their hardware and the things that they have to deal with. Well, Meta, Bigscreen is this small little startup, and they have to figure out how do we differentiate and appeal to an audience. And we see it right in our comments here. Craig suggesting this device highlights my belief that VR or XR is a personal product, not for sharing. You almost see it a little bit in the Apple Vision Pro design, right? Where they didn't immediately add a whole lot of features for guest sharing. They had to add that in Vision OS 2. So you could go put the headset on another person and then have it remember their settings for a little while. Like that wasn't out the gate the way Apple Vision Pro debuted its product. It took quite a while for Meta even to add secondary accounts that you could add to your main account. But this is hardware fitted for one person. And I totally understand that trade-off. Like if you're going to try to push the market forward or stand out in some way, it makes a lot of sense to appeal to the people that are going to spend thousands of hours in places like VR chat, where they're using this with body trackers, they're combining this with their full Steam VR body tracking, and they don't leave the house very often, right? Like that's their socialization is inside virtual reality. For those kinds of people, this sort of thing makes a lot of sense. You're not putting that headset on your family or showing it off to them. You're going into your bedroom and putting the headset on and socializing on your weekends. Instead of doing a bar crawl, you're doing a VR chat crawl, and that's your socialization. That's the kind of product that this seems ready-made for, and the type of market that they're trying to appeal to. And for a startup that's building, hand assembling these things one at a time, there are thousands of people out there that are doing that. You go look at the numbers the VR chat just shared. They're saying more than 100,000 people are in VR chat on a regular weekend day. And they couldn't give it.
But are all of those VR users, or some of them on a flat screen?
Yeah, there's the David going straight to the question. They won't break down, but I think the hint was that it was greater than 50% being in VR. But I'd have to go. The wording on it was vague enough that I can't identify. But it was still suggested that there's at least tens of thousands. logging in VR on a regular basis to VR chat just at any given moment. And those are the types of people that they're trying to hand assemble these things for.
So I think there is a midpoint between the Quest solution of a fully adjustable IPD, I guess, at least in Quest 3, and all the way to the big screen solution of it's literally fixed to one IPD, and that's what you get. There is one of the solutions is, of course, what Apple does, which is that they make 20 or so different facial interfaces and 2 strap sizes. So you get customization in the facial interface and strap size, and then adjustable headset. Another possible solution is to have lenses that are bigger and heavier, but have a wider eye box, so can support a wider range of IPDs. And then you make 4 or so sizes of headset. So you have a small, a medium, a large, and an extra large, or you start with extra small, whatever you name it. The point is that these lenses have a wide enough eye box to have 4 different versions of the headset that cover the entire population. Then you still get rid of the lens separation adjustment mechanism, but you have a 4 or so, and then reselling still becomes a challenge, right? It's like when you resell clothes, it has to be for the size. You can't, sell your extra large t-shirt to someone that needs a small, but it doesn't become like your IPD has to be literally my IPD to sell. And that's something that Immersed is doing with Visor, they claim. They're making 4 sizes. And I think we'll see other companies start to do that in future as well.
Yeah, and just since the mention of Immersed, let's just recap our story there that, David put on Immersed, I put on Immersed, and we saw a product that is very, very far away from shipping and being consumer ready. This is a product that is shipping to users, and but I do notice our commenters are bringing up the usability issues, some of the people that have had to return their units because of mismatched IPD. And to answer the one commenter, yes, one of my eyes is not centered to my face at the same distance as the other eye, and that's my particular usability issue that affects me quite a bit in VR. And yeah, that's an issue for some people out there, at least. I had a PR person call it a weird IPD at one point, and that felt a little awkward. So yeah, I'm a little bit of Quasimodo on my face, and yeah, it's a thing for people out there, especially when you're trying to make these things fit everyone.
I mean, it's definitely a thing, right? It's why Apple designed Vision Pro's mechanism to support that. As you say, the motorized adjustment in Vision Pro will move each lens to horizontally align pretty much perfectly with your eye, thanks to eye tracking. A question in the comments from David Bigelow asking, will Bigscreen have a backup plan if/when HTC stops making base stations? So I think HTC still sells Vive Pro 2, which relies on base stations. But also Valve sells base stations, right? You don't need to have it from HTC. You can just go on to Steam and order a Valve base station to support this. And I think that's what a lot of people do, as well as index controllers. I'm pretty sure the primary base stations and controllers for Bigscreen Beyond would be purchased from Valve.
I think Afro Badger's comment here is a good one to probably leave off on. I want to say thank you to Robert Quinones saying that they have the same issue as me, and the fact that even on flat screen monitors, the bloom that they see happens at different spots on their eyes. But Afro Badger's comment here, I think, sums up a lot of our reporting, our messaging to our viewers to kind of warn them about the state of the market and how to think about this. Immersed needs to take a leaf out of Bigscreen's books and focus on the product and not on the sales. I think that comment really summarizes a lot of the discomfort out there, a lot of the icky feeling you go out and see when you see the threads of people who are trying to like lure you into the bandwagon here and get you to place a pre-order. I think a lot of our commenters, want to see the product actually finished before putting those pre-orders in, and not feeling comfortable with this just pre-order pitch that's constantly coming out of Immersed when we saw something that is so far away from warranting that kind of support right now. Let's move on to the meta section. So the first
just
thing
one
here,
last, I want to just reply to David Bigelow's comment there, saying Valve doesn't make the base stations anymore. Well, thanks to multitasking on Horizon OS now, I'm on Steam. I just put 2 Valve Index base stations into my cart, And if I wanted to, it says it'll arrive within 3 to 5 business days. So I think, based on what I'm seeing right now, I think Valve does still make base stations.
Big saying you're ignoring mass market product design in the reseller market. You sell or trade in your phone for modern models.
I think
If
we
it
did
was
bring that
unique
up.
to your hand, somehow the reselling market breaks down. There is no reselling market here. It's a very
We
difficult reselling market.
Yeah, we brought that up, right? We said that multiple times.
Yep. No, it's another angle on the same subject there. That's
Sure.
interesting context. Yeah, let's move on to Meta here now. So Meta's Interaction SDK now supports Unreal Engine and non-Meta headsets. We've got 3 or 4, 5, 6 Meta stories to get through here. We've got several Meta stories to get through here. So let's try to get through them as quickly as possible here. David, what is this one?
Yeah, so the Interaction SDK from Meta is designed to stop developers having to reinvent the wheel on common hand-based interactions. So it supports both hand tracking and controllers, or multimodal, where you have one controller in one hand. And so it allows developers to add direct object grabbing and holding, distance grabbing, pokeable 2D and 3D buttons, teleportation, gesture detection, and as we covered last week, the latest version even includes Horizon OS UI set to allow them to implement the user interface of Horizon OS into their app and not have to reinvent that either. So this is something that developers find useful to not have to reinvent the wheel. So it used to only be available for Unity, and the news here is that it's now available for Unreal Engine as well. And I know we do have a certain Unreal Engine developer in our comments who loves to talk about that. The other news is that the Unity version supports non-Meta headsets now. So they've separated and the dependency on the Interaction SDK from the Meta XR Core SDK. So you can actually just use it with Unity's built-in XR support. And if you're building for, Steam VR, Pico, whatever you're building for, you can now use this same Interaction SDK. The one caveat on the Unreal Engine version is that it doesn't have the Horizon OS UI set. So the OS UI set we talked about last week is still only available for Unity.
So TMS's comment there, I would direct you to our previous shows where we really unfold that subject quite a lot. So go look at the Orion Glasses VR download episode where we break down field of view and the fact that leads to completely different software stacks, right? Valve makes its money off of video games, the sale of video games, and the sale of video games from flat screen to VR. So I do always, there's always a grain of truth in thoughts like that, in questioning sort of what is Valve's commitment to VR. But it's also a very large leap to suggest that what you're suggesting there in the comments. I think Valve has a unique place in the market that not a whole lot of people respect, right? They've been able to achieve market dominance for PC VR by basically stopping Meta and Microsoft from doing anything of significance in PC VR for the past decade. And, they did that with a fraction of the spending that anybody else threw into the market. So that's just by adding OpenXR to Steam, right? Like they added an open standard and helped work with the community to make that standard big.
I don't.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, David.
I don't know if that's the case to say that Valve, stopped Meta and Microsoft. Let's be honest, Microsoft barely did anything. They invested in almost no content. They told people to go on Steam from the get-go. Meta saw that Quest was selling significantly more than Rift S and that they were seeing this huge ecosystem emerge on standalone and pretty much just gave up. I don't think it was anything to do with what Valve was doing. And in fact, today it's the opposite, right? They're collaborators. And in some way, I would say that's why it makes the comment of, this user saying Valve are probably done with VR so strange. It's not even been a year since Valve released Steam Link for Quest. We're in this era where the most popular PC VR headsets are Quests. Meta headsets are used on Valve's platform. Both companies get what they want, right? Meta gets more people in their ecosystem buying their headsets. Valve gets people coming on Steam buying PC VR games. I don't see them even as competitors anymore, as we've seen with Steam Link, right? When Steam Link released, Meta's CTO, Andrew Bosworth, was straight onto social media saying, this app is great. Go grab this. Go get Steam Link and start using your Quest on Steam. They allowed it. They promoted it. They helped them be one of the first apps to use the 2D panel solution. I don't see that being the landscape anymore for years and years now.
So Steam, the mention of previous Steam efforts, right? I think that's, again, I don't think that's fair to the effort there. Steam Link is one of the best apps ever made for gaming. Like it is a utility that up there with Virtual Desktop is a go-to for many, many people in many, many respects. And the things that they did with those hardware devices that are no longer being sold inform the way remote play works, inform the way controller bindings work across the great range of devices out there. I did this thing with Steam Link where I had my kid in one city log in on their phone to my PC at home. I had a gamepad in my hand, and we played a digital board game together with them as one player with one kind of controller in their hands, a touchscreen phone, playing the same game on my PC thousands of miles away. And I was using a gamepad, and we were switching back seamlessly, turn by turn, going through this game. And it's the same darn app that we're talking about. It's the same platform that Steam has just evolved slowly and slowly and slowly. And I don't, I hate all the negativity that gets associated with this genuine advance in what you can do. Couch co-op is this close, and it's a reality for a lot of people right now, having their friends back into their house for co-op games because of Steam Link, because of those hardware platforms that Valve shipped over the years.
Yeah, I think some people in the comments are conflating Steam Link, the hardware, the little TV box that Valve used to make, with Steam Link, the software. And what happened there was that as smart TV platforms like Android TV and Apple TV and Roku and all of that started to proliferate and be available on pretty much every TV, Valve realized we don't need to make a piece of hardware. You can just have it on your Apple TV box or your Android TV and all of these platforms that are getting built into TVs like Fire OS. And so, that's how I use Steam Link today on my TV. It's just, part of Android TV. So that's obviously something that they have in VR as well on Apple Vision Pro. It's an app that is based off, it is just the iPad app, right? That you can bring up and have your flat screen games on a giant screen with the gamepad you have connected to either your PC or the Vision Pro on Quest. It's a way to go straight into Steam VR, and they're updating it every month on all of these platforms. Steam Link regularly gets software updates. So I don't think the idea that Steam Link is dead is true at all. It just shifted from a hardware offering to a software offering. In the same way that Valve's VR offering has, right? Like that's what's happened here. They've gone from being, the Index, which is now 5 years old and essentially in some ways obsolete. And then now their current strategy is you just get your $300 or $500 Quest and download their free app, and boom, you're on Steam VR.
Yeah, and the dream in my head has always been a single game that starts off flat. You play half the game in flat, and then you decide you want to spend a 15-minute section in VR. It expands out to you. It's all the same technology underlying Steam to make that possible. They have to compete now with Oculus's rules and the way they manage those sorts of things on their platform, and it's all converging in that same place. We've had examples over the years of games that did this and they had to walk away because the software stack wasn't ready or the audience wasn't ready, but the dream still remains, right? Go check out some of the work from Team Beef and the way you can transition with a press of a button from third person to first person instantaneously, and the way that shifts you from discomfort in VR to comfortable watching something in third person, and then right back into your body doing everything again. Like, devs are still innovating, and engineers at the software level are still innovating in real time in every possible way to make this more comfortable, to make that transition from flat to VR more meaningful. Gosh, I mean, this is a conversation that is ongoing in our community that doesn't seem to go away anytime soon, no matter how hard we try to break it down. But like, you can even see it in the Batman Arkham Shadow conversation, where all the joystick jockeys are out there complaining that I want to do less in Batman Arkham Shadow. I want to play it on my gamepad. Darn it, this is unfair. Why? Why do the developers hate money? You know, all that whining that we hear out there, it's miserable. And it's the same sort of thing, right? This one game that's magic on one platform needs changes to be magic on another platform. And the software is getting built out to do that, and people are mad that it's not here yet. Let's move on to this really cool one from Meta. Meta CTO sharing a photo of holding a super wide field of view prototype headset. Why don't you break down the specifics here? Why people are so interested in this device, and also the reasons why we're unlikely to see anything like it anytime soon.
Yeah, so field of view is arguably the single most important driver of immersion. It's alongside tracking what makes VR fundamentally different from a monitor, right? Because not all VR games use hands, right? Some of them are using a gamepad or a flight stick or a steering wheel, but you're still in VR. Not all, VR is still magical if you have only vision in one eye, right? Even without the 3D aspect. The 3D aspect is great if you do have that, but that's not the real magic here. It's having a wide field of view, tracked view into a virtual world. And we've seen in the past 10 years since consumer VR started its resurgence from nothingness, we've seen this mostly stagnate, right? Most Meta, Oculus, Facebook, whatever you want to say, headsets stayed around the just below 100-degree mark. We only have just seen some budging recently, where Quest Pro got to around 108 degrees, and Quest 3 is now at 110 degrees horizontal. But it's still a far cry away from what human vision is, which is like beyond 200 degrees. You're talking 210, 220, depending on the shape of your face. And having that peripheral vision massively enhances immersion. I know because I've tried it. I've tried headsets that have 180 degree, 190 degree field of view, and it truly is incredible. And there was one company, we have to say, that did push this for a while on PC, and that was Pimax. Although, of course, the field of view out in the periphery there was really distorted. It was kind of a fishbowl effect. There are people who were happy to make that trade-off and say, even though the field of view in the periphery isn't high quality, I prefer it over not having field of view in the periphery at all. So coming back to this story, Reality Labs research, Meta's research teams, and in specific, their display systems research team has been showing off these feature prototypes for years now that push one particular spec or new feature really far. And the purpose of these headsets, these aren't like products in development. The purpose of these headsets is to allow Meta's executives and other decision makers to see what does it look like if we take this feature or this spec and push it way, way far out. And from that, they can inform their future product decisions, because all of these prototypes allow you to dial these things in. I'll explain what I mean by that. So one of their prototypes was Butterscotch, and the idea was that it delivered retinal resolution. Now, contrary to this, it had retinal resolution in a very small field of view, around 50 degrees. Again, the purpose of the prototype is only to say, what does it look like if we get to retinal resolution, and then dial it back slowly, reduce the resolution, and find out where's the real tipping point at which this becomes really meaningful. How much does it matter to have 40 pixels per degree, 50, 60? How much does that really look like a difference to human eyes looking through this thing? The other prototypes we've seen and we've talked about are ultra bright high dynamic range. Ian and I both tried that one, where they had 20,000 nits and HDR, and then they do the same thing. They dial it down to 15,000, 10,000, 5,000, and they see, where does this matter? So another thing they did was with varifocal, and I tried the varifocal retinal prototype that had both of those things in one, where you could switch varifocal on and off, and you could dial down the resolution. The other thing they did that with, they had a pass-through prototype that used kind of hardware level pass-through without distortion and truly perspective correct. This prototype is for field of view, and they showed off this photo of Meta CTO holding it, and then in an Instagram Ask Me Anything session, he explained that it had around a 210 degree field of view, so it's pretty much your full horizontal field of view, but at very, very low resolution. Again, the purpose is to see, how much do we dial down that field of view? Where does it start to really, really matter? And then it can inform their future long-term product decisions. The last time we'd seen a prototype from Meta with a wide field of view was all the way back in 2018, the original Half Dome, which had around 140 degrees. And since then, the future versions of Half Dome had smaller and smaller field of views. So it's interesting to see that we have a Meta executive being shown the effect of a very, very large field of view. But as he has said, Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, multiple times, the issue with increasing field of view, especially on standalone, is that the performance requirement of rendering all these extra pixels is quadratic. As you increase that, it dramatically increases. However, the thing that Bosworth never really seems to acknowledge is that if you're using eye-tracked foveated rendering, then that becomes a lot less of an issue. Now, to be fair to Bosworth, you're still rendering the extra geometry, right? You have to think that if you're rendering, for example, beyond 180 degrees, you're rendering so much of a virtual world that you're literally rendering some of the stuff that's behind you. You're rendering a huge number of objects and all of the effects and shaders that are involved there. But it's not the same as if you're doing it all at full resolution if you did have eye-tracked foveated rendering. So the final thing I'll say is that Bosworth once again reiterated what he has said on multiple occasions now, which is that for him, the immediate priority is actually in increasing vertical field of view. So Quest headsets today have a vertical field of view of about 96 degrees, but humans can see between around 130 to 150, again, depending on your face shape. And that actually echoes what Valve said back when they were developing the original Vive with HTC, that they found in their research that vertical field of view was actually more impactful than horizontal. The reason being, especially in room scale standing up VR, that when you can see the floor where you should be walking as you're walking along, that actually creates this kind of connect between your subconscious and the virtual world that makes you say, I really am in this virtual environment. Whereas if you have this narrow vertical field of view, like in Vision Pro, where you can't see the floor, there is this kind of, am I really connected in this virtual world? So based on those comments, I would expect that if Meta does have an increase in field of view in Quest 4, Quest 5, future products, it'll probably become more vertical than horizontal.
So a lot of really interesting discussion and curiosity out there from our audience. Let's see. There's the one here from Bringhurst VR say, do you think we'd be in a different place if John Carmack had stuck around? His priorities seemed much different. It's a lot more complex than that question. We appreciate the question. It's one of the, frontier areas of our reporting that we will be on top of going forward. We have some of the world exclusive reporting on UploadVR.com that tracked a lot of these questions over the years. I myself was at, I think it was 2015 at Oculus Connect 2, and I put a camera in front of John Carmack, and my arm got shaky for 20 minutes as I was trying to hold it up and record every minute of what he said. I was getting tired holding my hand up, and he just kept talking. And I waited for my time to ask him on the record in that setting, what is the state of mobile positional tracking? And he said, I wished I had someone working on it for the last year. Now, this is the CTO of Oculus. That's his title at the time, or even though it's not really what he does. He had his own team that was like a focused group that focused on specific problems that he wanted to solve, that he viewed as the next big problem to solve. And it wasn't his MO. That's not how he operated, to go and say to thousands of engineers, I need a team on this, a team on this, a team on this, and a team on this. That's never what Carmack did as his role with his team in Dallas that kept focused on his subjects. The question, of course, becomes, could Meta have achieved something like a Quest much earlier had someone like Carmack not been doing his role the way he did it? If you tossed people like Brendan Arib to the curb quicker, and you gave Carmack like the CTO role at Facebook proper earlier, could Meta have achieved a Quest in 2017? Maybe that's a really interesting thing to think about long term, but that's not the way things played out. That's not the way these people worked or wanted to work, and the structure that they were born into with Facebook.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that some people assume the opposite of what Carmack's actual goals and wants were, right? Firstly, as you've pointed out, Ian, Carmack was absolutely a huge fan of the mobile VR approach. He really liked Gear VR and Oculus Go. He wanted that to be the full priority, not the PC-based Rift. So a lot of people think that's the opposite. He was actually the biggest proponent of mobile VR. And there are interviews of Carmack back in 2013 where he described essentially what would become Quest, as Ian is again alluding to. He said, eventually I want these headsets, to have cameras on them for inside-out positional tracking through computer vision, and I want them to have like a chipset on board that runs Android. Yes, he was the biggest fan of this approach. And if he had been in full charge back then, as you say, and he probably would have just ditched the Rift solution and said, let's put everything into building these mobile standalone headsets. The other thing is, in more recent years, after Quest did exist, Carmack's priority, as he said in multiple public interviews, was cheaper, faster, better. He actually believed that Quest 2 was the right feature set. He was happy with that headset, and he wanted the next one to just be the same thing, but cheaper, faster, lighter, better. So I think if Carmack had become the czar of Meta and they just said do whatever you want, you actually would have seen a Quest 3S type headset, but without the mixed reality stuff. Just the same thing. Those 4 cameras of Quest 2, the XR2 Gen 2, the faster part, and take off as much weight as you possibly could. Again, which is interesting. But Carmack's bigger disagreements in recent years were on the software side of things and about how things are managed and the kind of software priorities that Meta has. For example, the Horizon OS interface being done in like JavaScript and React, whereas he wanted everything to be done very low level in like Go or C++. And it was just a very, very different approach to how these software systems are engineered.
Yeah, the trade-offs here. So there was another question asking, of the things we've tried or the things that we think are out there, what do we think are the right trade-offs? What do we think are the features to maximize? Given that I saw HDR, I just want to call out how dramatic HDR felt, that high brightness display. There's actually a video out there at a game developer conference from Valve, a Valve representative, Alex, at the time, I think it was, presenting and talking about how Valve had built an HDR prototype, and he felt the heat of the displays on his face in a scene that looked like the beach. So he felt like the sun was actually beaming down on his cheeks because of the increased heat coming out of the display. And I love that picture to me, the picture painted for me in my head of what happens when you have a fan up there that's blowing down heat, perfectly synced up with the action in VR, and you feel the dragon's breath actually beaming down on you in real time. That's going to be amazing. But it all trades off short term with how do we make this thing appeal to more people? That's Meta's big play, is let's get 1 billion people into VR. Let's actually put those headsets out there in that kind of number. And to me, that's weight. Weight is the first thing to solve of all the things to solve. Get the weight down, lighter than you've got today, and then you can go to the other things. You see it even with Apple Vision Pro, a headset that is from the future, so to speak. Meta, Apple's asking you to fork over your cash hoard in order to help them bring this thing from the future into the present. And it's a bulky monster to put all of that stuff. So weight is my big thing to maximize right now, even though, man, I want that environmental thing I just talked about.
Yeah, I think the irony when it comes to brightness, and this image, in case you're wondering, is the Starburst prototype that Ian and I both tried a few years ago that Ian was just referring to. The irony is that we've gone backwards on brightness because of pancake lenses. Pancake lenses have some really great advantages, right? In Quest 3 and Vision Pro and the other headsets like Pico 4 that use them, you get a slimmer headset, which means that the weight is closer to your face, making less of a lever, so it feels lighter, even though it's the same weight. You also, of course, get the fact that you get a much better clarity, this much better sharpness. And on Vision Pro's case, you can support micro OLED displays for high pixel density and fill factor. The problem with pancake lenses, their big trade-off, is that they have very low optical efficiency, which means that most of the brightness of that display behind the pancake lens in your Quest 3 or Vision Pro is getting wasted in the lens itself. So Vision Pro's displays, for example, are actually remarkably bright, as are Quest 3's. But so much of that gets lost in the lens that you actually see an image that is dimmer than Fresnel headsets. So the Quest 3S or the Quest 2 is brighter than Quest 3 or Vision Pro. And, you can get some other headsets that use aspheric lenses, for example, Vario XR4 or Somnium VR1, that are significantly brighter to your eye than these pancake lens headsets. So, we are a long way off getting towards brightness that's higher. But coming back to field of view, which is what we're talking about in this subject, some of the commenters have rightly pointed out another advantage of vertical field of view, as well as seeing the floor, is that if you have body tracking, either just inside out body tracking like you have on Quest 3 and 3S, or full body tracking with worn trackers or other solutions, being able to see your body gives you this kind of other sense of connection, not just to the environment, but to your virtual self, so that you actually feel that you're there in that environment. So you get this double effect that not only do you feel like you're in an environment, but you feel like your body is in an environment. And that's why, again, we do expect to see vertical field of view be Meta's priority. And hopefully it'll be Apple's, because one of the things I criticized harshly in my Vision Pro review, and one of the ways in which Vision Pro is just objectively worse than any Meta headset to date, is that it has a really narrow vertical field of view. And that's fine when you're just watching, widescreen video content like a 3D movie or Disney Plus or whatever. But if you're in an immersive environment like a VR game, it actually was deeply impactful and was probably the biggest surprise I had when I put on Vision Pro for the first time.
It's really interesting to see the commenters focusing so much on John Carmack there. We do have I think some of the best reporting in the world on John Carmack and his contributions to VR. We even have some really exclusive words on our own website of him coming to the defense of Echo Arena. I reached out to him and brought those comments straight to public view directly from him. The interesting thing, for those who aren't aware, Carmack saw, like, if you don't remember his journey, he went and did rocketry after doing the Doom stuff in the 90s, and he just was like, I want to solve rockets. And a bunch of his rockets didn't make it. They blew up, or they didn't get to their destination as they should have. And he essentially lost that race to Elon Musk and SpaceX, as they're trying to solve the hard problems that are needed to be solved in order to open up space for the rest of us, right? He went and did VR after that, and was this key place in VR's history in representing, like, the thing that that he did that no one else at Meta, Facebook, Oculus did, is at every Oculus Connect ever held, Carmack would come out and talk to the people who have attended the event for hours. He would lose his voice talking to them. He would answer their questions for hours and hours and hours. And that sort of accessibility of an executive is like what Bosworth is doing in his own way in his Instagram AMAs every week or so, right? And that's not the same thing, right? It doesn't feel the same to you, the developers of these games, and you, the ones that are trying to figure out what to do, when you can actually see this dude face to face. He puts on the headset because you put it in his hands, and he gives you direct, straight feedback on what he thinks about your thing. He did that at every Oculus Connect he was at, and it was an extraordinarily, like, humanizing thing for the whole effort, by and large. And I just want to call that out for the people that are sort of remembering him and what he did for VR. But he dropped all that because he thinks AGI, artificial general intelligence, is potentially, he could be one of the people to deliver that to, right? So that's his startup he's gone off to do with his money. And recall, what he did was he spent all of his money on rocketry. He wasted his cash hoard. He made a cash hoard off of stuff he had done previously, spent it all on some rockets that failed. He spent what he could, and then he's like, okay, I got to build it up again. And then he went to Oculus, made a whole chunk of money off of what he did with Oculus. And now he took that chunk of money and started off AGI. So the people that are wishing for him to come back, like, think about what that means. Like, there's still potential for Meta to go back to Carmack and say, holy crap, you made an AGI. We have to have that. Here's $50 billion to come back as our CTO.
I mean, I think if Carmack manages to achieve AGI, it'll be more like the value of that's going to be trillions, right? But we'll have to see. I would say the one thing I'd say on rocketry, because this is a side interest of mine, is that Musk was very close to being the exact same situation. For Falcon 1, the first successful launch they had was the launch that, had it failed, he would have also ran out of money and folded. So that was an incredibly hard business. And I don't think it's any fault of Carmack. It's one of those things that, it's literally rocket science, right? It was very, very tough. But the other thing I'd say about Carmack, for anyone today who kind of wonders, what's the relevance to modern VR? A lot of the fundamental rendering technologies that every single headset uses today, and I mean every single headset, were invented by Carmack. Some of the reprojection techniques, for example, some of the low-level scheduler stuff. There is code today at the very core of Horizon OS that was developed by Carmack for Gear VR that then went through to Oculus Go, to Quest, to the headset that you have today. But
let's leave this subject. We're at an hour into this show, and we are really having great comments. I want to encourage everyone to hit the like button, maybe share this link out to your friends. Anyone who's new to VR that is curious, we like to be a very inviting place where we answer those basic questions. It's one of the reasons our shows tend to run long. We've also got our various tangents that we run off on because of the comments or because of us. But we love to answer those questions, and our commenters are so supportive of those people who ask those core questions of VR. I'm gonna put it out just into the ether because I've wanted it for years, and it's just, Carmack will do whatever Carmack wants to do. He has no reason to do anything except what he wants to do. But I love this community, and I so wish that we could have Carmack sitting right where you're sitting, David Heaney, and watching one of Meta's MetaConnect events with our audience. He can look at the comments and reply to commenters. I can look at the comments and bring out ones to him to respond to, and we could do a VR download with Carmack in the studio while Meta is announcing all of its things. And I would bet we would compete with Meta itself for its viewership, right? Because of how many people want to hear Carmack's words unfiltered like that. They miss that desperately in the audience.
I love the idea of a live interview with Carmack. That's great. The one part I don't like is doing it during a stream. I don't know about you, but I've never liked the people talking over a stream, because you have literally, these events are someone constantly talking. So you're going to have someone constantly talking and then us talking over the talking. I know some of the younger generation like this now, but I hate hearing people talk over each other.
I would leave it muted on the background. Our audience wouldn't hear it. They could have the dual streams on their computers if they wanted. But here's a stream of Carmack reacting to what he's seeing. So he's watching something. He says, oh, well, yeah, we worked on that in 2015 in this way, shape, or form. And our audience would just hear Carmack. They could see the stream and what we're watching, but they wouldn't hear it. And they could have the stream running dual. But yes, we wouldn't. You're right.
It'd be 1,000 times better to just do it right after the stream, would it not? And then you can, everyone can have heard.
We wouldn't compete with the main show. Yeah, that's right.
Why
that's
would
true.
you want to?
All right, well, let's put it out there that we want this details, with Carmack. Right? Yeah, we want this, and there's a way to get it done that serves everyone. And man, people miss him. People miss that viewpoint.
Mastoris Mars in the comments asked, where would I sit? If you're a very eagle-eyed viewer of this podcast, sometimes you will notice something at the very end of the show, and sometimes when we reconnect, and that's the answer to that question. So are we ready to talk about the Ray-Ban glasses?
Yeah, let's talk about this one. So this is Meta Ray-Ban's glasses are the top-selling product in many Ray-Ban stores. So there's some takeaways we can make from this, as well as the thing I've always wondered. So you'll give the takeaways here, but the thing I wonder is how many of these glasses go into disuse over time? What's the relationship between VR and how many people just forget them or don't keep them charged up or leave them at home or start actually feeling uncomfortable capturing after they've been using them for a couple months? I wonder about that, and I'd love to see those numbers. But those aren't the numbers we have right now. The numbers we have are indicating that this thing is selling like hotcakes at a price point that was previously unachievable in glasses. So, David, why don't you break this down?
Yeah, first I'll address what you said there. So we have seen Meta on previous earnings calls say that they have seen massively increased retention of this model compared to the last one, mostly just due to the minor software updates. The other thing is what they've said and what I've seen from talking to owners of this is that a lot of people aren't just using this as camera glasses, and that just isn't even their primary usage. It's actually the audio capabilities and now AI that people are using this for a lot. So, myself, for example, I use this to listen to audiobooks and podcasts and to take phone calls. Since I've got these glasses, I don't take phone calls on any other device. The ability to have that open ear audio, so I'm hearing something without having to hold anything up to my face or cover my ears, and I can walk around naturally and still interact with the world, is a game changer. I think that's actually the primary hit of this for me, at least. So, that the camera part doesn't even factor in. Sure, do I use the camera occasionally? Yeah, but I don't really use these for much other than the audio capabilities. Let me just cover the news first before we move on to there. So the news we have here, the reason we're talking about this is that EssilorLuxottica, the conglomerate that owns Ray-Ban, had their earnings call a few days ago, and they talked about the success of this, and they gave a specific stat for one of the reasons. So I'll read out the entire quote here from this earnings call from their chief financial officer to investors. Ray-Ban Meta, very happy about the performance that we've seen. I mean, it's an overall success story that we see. Just to give you an idea, it's not just a success in the US where it's obvious, but it's also a success here in Europe. Just to give you an idea, in 60% of the Ray-Ban stores in Europe, in EMEA, Ray-Ban Meta is the best seller in those stores. So it's something that is extremely pleasing. And the context there is EMEA refers to Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. It's a geographical division that companies often use. And EssilorLuxottica is a European country. So that's why they're focusing on that data and saying here in Europe.
Yeah, so I was going to add to the open ear audio. I think it's an underappreciated feature. David's exactly right. I love emulated games on the open ear audio, and it's surprising to me. It took me a while to put my finger on it. If you played games back in the 90s or 80s on a Nintendo 64, whatever, and then you go and get those games on an emulator on a modern phone. The open ear design simulates what it was like to hear those sounds without earbuds in back when you were a kid, because you didn't have earbuds in when you were watching your TV. You had open ear solution. So it's this little tricky thing that you don't even realize. Wait, this feels a little bit more like the feeling I had back in the 90s because of the open ear audio design, and it's kind of magic because of the open ear audio design. And I hates using the AirPods now. Totally agree with you there. I've got the same feeling. I'm getting lured into these more for the audio solution. Any comments you want to respond to before we move on?
David Bigelow just saying that you've sold him on Ray-Bans. We have Show Futuristic saying hate using AirPods now. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people. It's remarkable how much people actually really like this product. It's clearly a hit from sales. And the biggest thing I see when I look on social media, because one of the things I love to do is for both headsets and glasses, look to see what are regular people saying about this. So I love to scour the reviews section of retailers away from our bubble and see what are regular people buying headsets and glasses say about them. And then I look at social media and look at the trends and see what are people saying. And the biggest sentiment I see for this is like, whoa, I didn't know this even existed. And I didn't really realize how much I would like this. And as soon as I got it, I was like, why didn't I get this earlier? It sounds like I'm doing marketing for them. I'm really not. I use this product a lot in my life. That's not, I have no conflict of interest here. I just find that I walk around the park and I put these things on and I can hear my audiobook or my podcast, and I can also stay completely connected to the world. Yes, you've got transparency mode on AirPods, and I have the Pixel Buds Pro that does the same transparency mode, but there's a fundamental difference in just having this perfect, uninterrupted, pain-free experience of hearing the world around you, and there's no kind of like fumbling to switch your mode on your AirPods or whatever. You just speak to someone, and it's really remarkable how good the audio is on these for the size of the stems as well.
Yeah, and I do want to point out this. I am going to go. Let's move on this, but I do want to bring up sort of like this. Did you guys see this dash cam video that just went circulating over the internet? Give me a minute to go off on this tangent here. dash cam videos showing an apparent car crash, and now there's videos following up on what happened here, where people have tracked down the car based on the license plate and have done things to the car apparently because of what happened in this dash cam video. What is the equivalent to that when captured on the Meta Ray-Ban glasses? We have yet to see it. We have yet to see generalized human behavior. Like, most people in public do not know these things are there, that they're capturing videos and photos all the time. There's no public perception. These are still in their absolute infancy compared even to drones.
Not capturing photos and videos all the time. If they're capturing a photo and a video, you have to specifically, like, that's the difference between a dash cam and these. They're not capturing video all the time. You have to initiate a video recording by pressing a button or saying, hey, Meta, start recording. And then you have a white blinking light on the front that indicates that you're recording. So just want to make that context very clear here.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's just, we don't have any social understanding of what that white light means. People see the white light and get creeped out. It's even creepier to see the white light on the sunglasses edition, right? Than the plain glasses edition. It like looks, why is the person covering up their eyes while also recording me? Like it causes this thing in other people onlooking. It's, I'm going to keep harping on this because it is going to develop in real time. We will see really weird social interactions happening in public because of these things as people learn about them.
I mean, I'm not surprised that if someone sees the flashing light in public, that they would have a problem with it. I personally wouldn't start randomly recording walking along the street, right? In the same way that I wouldn't hold my phone up and walk along the street. And I'm sure you get some people feel a little uncomfortable if you're doing that as well.
And yet, David, we're 10 years into people setting up their phones to do little TikTok dances in front of every single place, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be a long journey here of general user understanding. Let's move on to our last.
I was just going to say, the
right?
version I have is the transition lenses. So when they're in the sun, they become sunglasses. And when they're in the typical UK weather, which is do not see the sun at all, as I'm sure all of our UK viewers know, they're just regular transparent glasses. I don't actually need glasses, so they're just transparent for me. I'm just using them for the audio capabilities mostly, right? So I don't think... So I see a comment from George Jorgensen saying, I have no idea what David is talking about. No one I've seen is reacting to Ray-Bans the way he says they are. Are you referring to Ian?
Yeah, he might have mixed this up there, but I'm saying no one is reacting to them because they don't know what the heck's going on. And as these things become, anyways, we'll get into it over time. We'll see it. We'll bring up the examples as we get into it, right? The example of walking down the street, right? If you're wearing these sunglasses as you go into a bathroom, do you take the sunglasses and put them on the top of your head? Or do you leave them on your face as you're going into the bathroom? This is an unanswered social question that is going to be discovered painfully, one punch in the face at a time. So we'll see it as that develops.
In some situations, but as you point out, we are in a very different world, right? If I'm at a pub or a bar, I often, to be honest, see people sitting on their phone in the toilet, even when they're like in a queue for a urinal or whatever. Nobody seems to really care. I've seen people literally like taking a Snapchat of themselves where in the background, technically, there are people going to the toilet. Nobody really seems to care, but these could be cultural differences. These could be, the kind of person to happen to be out in a bar or more accepting of these things. They're going to be, serious issues here. But to come back to the story itself, the fact that, as you alluded to at the start, these things start at $300 and more if you want transition lenses or other certain styles, whereas the equivalent of each of these are, smartified models of existing Ray-Ban. The equivalent ones are about half the price. So the fact that we have these being the top seller in 60% of stores in EMEA is a good indicator that people are willing to pay more for smart glasses that have smart capabilities, just as Apple saw with the Apple Watch that people are willing to pay more for a watch that has smart capabilities. So over time, Meta recently extended their partnership with EssilorLuxottica into the 2030s. Over time, we're probably going to see more and more capabilities be added to these things. Eventually, you'd imagine they're going to have a version with a HUD, a heads-up display. Even if the first version reportedly will not be a Ray-Ban product, that'll just be Meta glasses. Eventually, you're going to see that, and eventually one day, on the order of perhaps decades, in this form factor, we might even see AR glasses. And it's a good initial sign if people are willing to pay more for even these displayless capabilities, where the only display you have on your side is a little LED on your side that shows you when you're recording or the microphone's listening to you.
Well, we've got one more, one more section on our meta topic for today, and we need to get moving. Otherwise, it's going to end up being a 2.5 hour episode. But this one is going to probably end up being a bigger discussion for us. So I want to make that call out to like this. Go hit the like button, please. Try to get more people in here as we discuss this, because this is hinting at what
Just
the
one,
future meta line can have.
Sorry to keep interrupting you, Ian, but there's one last thing I want to point out, which is that a commenter was suggesting or asking if it's easy to disable the recording LED. So something they've actually done in the Ray-Ban glasses is that two things. Firstly, the recording LED is hardware level. If the camera is being sampled, if it literally is using electricity, the LED goes on. So you cannot disable that on a firmware or software level. The other thing is that they actually have some sort of light sensor in the LED that can tell when it's covered. So if you cover the LED on the outside of this that shows people that you're recording, and I've tested it just out of interest in my own home, to be clear, not in public. You cover it and it says, cannot record while the LED is covered. So they have, built in two things: hardware level LED and anti-tamper mechanism for that, to avoid that. Now, I'm not saying that some cracked electronic engineer can't take these things apart and put them back together and figure that out, but I think that's well beyond the capabilities of the average buyer.
Yeah, are we ready to move on now, David?
Yeah. Sorry, let's go to that next topic.
So this is a meta focus group that was released that actually mentioned the product name, or the code name of a future product in Meta's arsenal that they're planning, and called out a potential feature that may be coming to that headset down the line. I think there's some really interesting things I talked about with David when we were going through this story that I'll bring up in discussion for us to think about. But David, why don't you break down what we can actually discern from this bit of news?
Sure. So this was spotted by VR enthusiast Luna. I want to give them full credit for finding this and forwarding the information to us. So this is a very interesting listing that is now being taken down. It was taken down about 6 hours after our article about it went up. And in it, you see this call for testers for a focus group called Project Pismo. And in this, they describe a Meta device. So you see, as down here, as you approach the Meta buildings, and this BUR 105 building is a Meta-owned building in Burlingame, California. They mention a device that involves recording your facial expressions and eye movements, as well as voice capture. And they mention this being a new device. And what's interesting about this is that a few months ago, The Information, a reliable outlet for future decisions from Meta that has been reliable multiple times in the future, reported that the codename for the two Quest 4 models that Meta reportedly plans for 2026 is Pismo Low and Pismo High. So they're going to do the same strategy again that they've done with Quest 3 and Quest 3S, a budget model and a more premium model, except reportedly this time with Quest 4, they're going to do it in the same year. So presumably they would release alongside each other. So you have that same code name that's being reported to be the code name for the Quest 4 family, being the name of this project that is at Meta that involves testing a device with facial expression and eye movement capturing. And so that is where we get to this conclusion that this suggests that Meta is exploring integrating both eye tracking and face tracking into Quest 4.
Yeah, so one of the questions I had for David, and he shut me down really fast, was what's the potential that we could see this next headset arrive in the area above Quest 3? This being a $600 device, a $900 device. Why wouldn't it benefit Meta to supercharge and get these things out as soon as humanly possible, with supposedly, with imagining a coprocessor, a meta developed coprocessor that does the face and eye tracking and then feeds that into the XR2 Gen 2, so that there isn't any performance loss in using the same generation processor and then building out this whole product line. Why wouldn't that happen on a more accelerated timeline?
So I think there's two reasons here that I would kind of come back on. Firstly, I think as we've said many times in this podcast, Meta's focus is on how do we get this technology, VR and mixed reality, out to the next 20 million or 30 million or 50 million people, right? What reportedly, in fact, Meta said around just under 2 years ago that Quest headsets had sold around 20 million units. And we think that's probably somewhere on the order of 30 million today. So their focus is on how do we get this to 50 million, 100 million, 200 million. And one day, as they stated, their goal was all those years ago, 1 billion people in VR. And I think if you look at their moves, right? Quest Pro is being retired. Quest 3 came in at 500, Quest 3S at 300. That's where they want to be. They want to have the $300 to $500 price range. And I don't think they want to go far beyond that. I think with Quest 4, the family, the Quest 4 and Quest 4S presumably being the names, they're going to want to do that again. Maybe they do have a little bit more separation, right? Maybe Quest 4S comes in at the $300, the magic price point, and then you get a Quest 4 high-end model that's $600, right? That is possible that you see a bigger spread than just the 200 that we have today. But I don't think they're going to want to do, a crazy model where they double the prices of both of these things. The other thing is that what we've seen so far with every Quest jump to date, from Quest 1 to Quest 2 and from Quest 2 to Quest 3, is a generational improvement in GPU performance. In fact, it's been pretty much a doubling both times. Quest 2 had double the GPU power of Quest 1, and Quest 3 and 3S have double the GPU power of Quest 2. So when they bring out a Quest 4, it's not just new features they want to add. As you say, they could just do a coprocessor. They also want a generational improvement in performance, because that is still the limiting factor for standalone VR right now. It's still the performance of the chipset, and that's what each generation pushes forward. So, as I've said a few times now, with Quest 3 and 3S, we finally have standalone VR games with graphics that don't suck, but they're still not great, right? Like, if you look at Batman Arkham Shadow, the graphics don't suck. And, you can even say they're decent or good, but nobody that has a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series would look at this and go, these are great graphics, right? To really get to that appeal where you can start to sell this to be at the kind of level that people expect from modern consoles, that kind of really high graphical fidelity, you need to keep pushing forward on GPU performance, and you need to start doing things like eye-tracked foveated rendering, perhaps, which is what eye tracking would allow, as well as for perhaps neural upscaling like we see on PS5 Pro. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit here to still push forward. So I think they're going to want to have Quest 4 be a generational improvement while still staying at the same rough price point of $300 to $600, that kind of range. And to do that, they're going to need to wait the 3 years that they waited between Quest 2 and Quest 3 to wait for mobile GPUs to get to that doubling.
So the other element I wanted to bring up here is what you can see directly in the studio. So David Heaney and I are both wearing Quest 3S headsets right now, which feature zero face and eye tracking. Yet I think he's done a remarkable job with filling in that gap with our face movement. So you're seeing my mouth move along with the words that I say, and there are incredible advances being made along those routes of working back to what face you're making based on the words that you're actually speaking. Well, that means that on headsets, eye tracking can help with social interaction, but it's also an absolutely fundamental functional thing for the headset in order to get higher fidelity graphics. That NextVR 180-degree video that is being streamed from Apple servers to your headsets, part of the magic of getting every pixel that matters to your eyeballs is the fact that your eyeballs are being tracked wherever they're looking at any given moment, right? That is a big thing to have in future headsets. Apple has kind of put the marker in the sand that it would be very, very unlikely for future Apple headsets to ship without eye tracking. Meta went and shipped the Quest Pro with eye tracking, but it wasn't good enough to do what I just described. Well, this is all pointing to the idea that there's a big difference in need for face tracking and eye tracking, and I would be really curious to see how Meta lands on which of those to ship.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So it's very likely, in our view, that Quest 4 would have eye tracking because, as you say, not only does it allow to realistic eye contact in social VR, it also has a score of other uses, right? You can do at the very least, guided IPD adjustment, where the system tells you, scroll this scroll wheel to the left or the right a little bit more, and at best, automatic, where you have the motorized lenses moving for IPD adjustment, so you get a better fit. You also, of course, have what a lot of enthusiasts care about, which is eye-tracked foveated rendering. That's what this is showing right now on Quest Pro. And that gets more important the higher resolution that you're trying to render in the first place. So for something like Vision Pro, that's really impactful. Whereas for Quest Pro, on its kind of sub 2K displays, it was only really about a 30% performance benefit. But if Quest 4 gets to 2.5K per eye or 3K per eye, Quest 3 for context is 2K per eye, that starts to be something that matters more and more. And of course, the other reason is, as you said, Ian, to be able to copy Apple's gaze and pinch interaction system that is fundamental to Vision OS, that you just look with your eyes and pinch with your hands, which is a lot faster and feels a lot smoother and less janky than direct hand interaction or the distance pinch of hand tracking. And we've seen from the reports that Meta does plan to put that in the ultralight 2027 headset. It would make a lot of sense for them to have that in Quest 4. I wonder, though, of course, as you say, to what extent would face tracking get in? Because that's a less vital feature. It's only important really for other people in social VR. As some commenters have asked, yes, we don't have eye tracking or face tracking right now. The eye tracking is simulated in this studio based on a salience of objects. So I, as a developer, just as other developers can do, mark each virtual object around here with a level of salience. So the highest would be someone's face, then you have your hands, each object around, and then the system kind of picks what to look at. Then we're also using the OVR lip sync plugin for audio-driven mouth movement. So yes, there's no camera on our mouth. These are just based on the microphone movement. But obviously that has limits, right? You can't pick up when somebody is like smiling or scowling or winking or making real eye contact. The thing is, though, if they have downwards facing cameras on the headset like Vision Pro has, you kind of can do that without having to have these cameras be dedicated for face tracking. So Vision Pro uses the same downwards facing cameras that they use to detect your hands pinching when they're down at your lap as they do for your face. So you can kind of imagine a Quest 4 family designed for this feature. I would be surprised if we see both of these features in the budget model, though, right? Pismo Low. But it wouldn't surprise me to see them in Pismo High as being a major focus, because as some of the commenters have pointed out, and that as some of the people in our comments throughout our articles have pointed out, and we've said before, it is really strange that Meta is the social company, right? That says the reason we're in this is that we want to connect people. They even used to say, Mark Zuckerberg and Bosworth, it's not about apps, it's about people and bringing them together. Our big focus, our biggest first-party app that we care about the most is Horizon Worlds, a social platform where virtual avatars connect. And as soon as Quest Pro stock runs out this year, we won't sell any headset with eye or face tracking. So you don't actually get to have real facial expressions. There is a massive disconnect in that messaging and the product strategy that they may want to solve with Quest 4.
Yeah, so on that note, we've got Meta has a long brewing line of research called codec avatars. And David and I have both seen these avatars used in various ways, and they are breathtaking. They are a mind opener in the same way that Apple personas are mind openers to VR in general. When you feel someone is in the room with you, even though they're actually thousands of miles away, you switch your brain over here. Well, Meta has this long brewing technology that they could supply to a company like Samsung if Samsung decided to include the sensors necessary to drive the codec avatars at the fidelity we've seen. If they have the processing on board to drive those types of avatars. We put some of this discussion out there on Twitter, but I think there has to be high-level discussions between Google and Meta on an ongoing basis to try to supply some of these technologies as a stopgap, as a competing technology to what Apple is doing with personas. And none of this is going to go away. Meta needs to ship this for itself, for its own future. And the question is, who do they partner with to do it? Do they ship it themselves in a future generation, or do they go and find a hardware partner who's willing to ship this earlier than that?
Yeah, well, I don't think it will be Samsung because Samsung's working with Google on Android XR. What it could be, though, is Asus or Lenovo or one of Meta's other Horizon OS partners. There is a very possible future where next year in 2025, we see a headset from Asus or Lenovo launch with eye tracking and or face tracking that exists as the only way to access, these first-party Meta content and other Horizon Store content with face and eye tracking. And then maybe they would want to test out codec avatars on that before the Quest 4 timeframe. It's also possible, though, that they will just wait for Quest 4, and that is the reason, that is the fundamental reason that they do want face and eye tracking in, so that they can do codec avatars on Quest 4, not some Quest Pro 2 that is reportedly cancelled anyway, the actual main $500 or $600 Quest 4, and that would be really deeply impactful for the entire industry, because right now you can get something somewhat similar with Apple's spatial personas, but every person that you connect with needs to have this $3,500 headset. We'll talk more about Vision Pro very shortly, but if you were able to have this where you have a photorealistic or near photorealistic representation of yourself driven by and rendered on a $600 or $500 headset, that would be enormous. I mean, that would be huge. At that point, you can start doing this for certain boardroom meetings where instead of having to constantly fly people around the world for some of these meetings, you just do it with a $600, $500 headset.
Yeah, and that is the big thing. Like, I could have my office in Walkabout right now. I've done it. It's fantastic to do multitasking, but what's missing there is the minuscule, minute expressions, the little when you can see the person frown in response to a suggestion instantaneously, without even them saying something, that they're not in the same place as you, right? Like, all those little human interactions are necessary for this technology to close the gap. But gosh, go back a little bit into this and just how do AR glasses present 5 humans all around you, and you see the spatialized audio is coming through all these 5 people, and you're rendering 5 avatars. How do you get that much stuff into AR glasses on your face with the wide field of view? That's one of the things that we really do see VR headsets getting into. They're already doing it now on Apple Vision Pro at $3,500. That's the path that we are harping on in our comments with this audience, that you all know the pathway to, right? We see the pathway to doing this, whereas the AR glasses out there have such a harder climb to achieve the same thing. There was one commenter I wanted to respond to from Bystander. Foot tracking accessory when? So PSVR downloads. Pico actually has a really interesting solution for this that they're exploring. Basically, if it's accessory from Pico, we'll do it. But they don't see it as a priority right now to bring our feet into VR for soccer purposes.
Yeah, I would just clarify that Pico is not exploring it, right? They shipped it. It's on the Pico 4 Ultra and the other headsets, and they're getting more content there. They're supporting it in VR chat, and I think Blade and Sorcery as well is going to support it on Pico. So, but as you say, it seems very unlikely that Meta is going to do that, and because they've come out and said, unless this is some sort of crazy hit that revolutionizes the market, that's not our focus. Again, we really just have to reiterate that Meta's primary focus is on growing this industry from, a maybe 30 million install base and 8 million active users or something like that to 10 times those numbers. That's their primary focus as a company.
Yeah, so let's move on to this NBA section that we have. We have 2 NBA stories to talk about here, I think. And then we've got our Apple section at the end of this show. Are there any comments you want to talk about before we get into NBA here, or are we ready?
No, I think we can talk about this NBA section. It's strange to have an NBA section, but it's just because there are 2 kind of angles from this. So the first one is that on Quest headsets in the US only, Americans only, for the 4th year in a row, 52 NBA games will be streamed in 180 degrees for free. So you can get this through the X Stadium app. You can go on UploadVR.com. We have a link to it, or you can just search for it in the Horizon Store. It's a free app. And this is, to be clear, 2D 180 degree streaming, but it is free. and it'll run on your Quest headset. If you're an American, you can see here someone, a visualization of someone using a Quest 3S. And you can actually also do this socially. This supports co-watching with people appearing beside you as a meta avatar. So I think Ian can maybe clarify what percentage of NBA games that 52 is, but 52 is better than nothing. And as we'll talk about, I guess we'll introduce both sections together. And when it comes to Apple's NBA news, it's that they're giving you kind of highlights of an NBA game, if I'm correct about this, from quite a while ago. So you're getting like 5 minutes of highlights in very high quality 3D on Vision Pro, whereas on Quest, you're getting lower quality and 2D only, but it's actually a live streamed game.
So put these two stories in context from the beginning of our show, the Gracia effort, where you're volumetrically able to walk around the scenes at bit rates that are beyond the average human's ability to stream into their home. That's the future-facing technology that currently is serving a very small segment of the VR audience, the PC VR people who can download those files or wait the time to get those files. That's the end goal for sporting events too. What does it look like to go to a sporting event in your headset and stand at the 50 court line, the 50-yard line in a football game, or the half court line in a basketball game, and you're standing there on the court, and you see the jump right in front of you, and it goes over, and you're leaning over to, a player walks through you, right, and all that stuff. That is going to require 15, 20 years of advancement in computation and camera capture and filling in all of those gaps. But what's remarkable here, working back to what we have today, NextVR was this company it used to be called Next 3D because they did 3D streaming technology. They changed over to NextVR, and they actually had a full slate of live NBA games that you could put on a Gear VR or an Oculus Go and look all around, and it was 3D, and it was streamed live as the game is happening, and it was phenomenal. It got attached, I think, to like NBA League Pass or whatever the TV program is. You had to have that, I think, at some point to log into some of those streams eventually. But this was an independent startup. NextVR was an independent startup based, had its funding from outside investors, and they made deals with NBA to put cameras in all the best places to put you in a seat that was better than half court. So you see all those movie stars and celebrities that have paid thousands of dollars to have that seat right courtside. You could put on your VR headset at home and be inside the backboard. And when the player comes up for a dunk, they throw it into the thing, and you're watching the dunk live as it happens in 3D. You're able to see the audience to the side of you, and just phenomenal. Well, over on the 52 games that are being streamed,
that's what they do in 2D.
Go ahead.
You can switch around. You can do exactly that with this. You're not just stuck courtside, as you say. You're saying this as if it was a thing in the past or hypothetical. Right now, you can go to UploadVR.com and read the 52 matches. You can do this on your Quest headset. You can teleport with your friends behind here or down here, and I think there's another angle up there. But it's
2D, right?
It's what do you say?
But 2D?
Yes, exactly. That's the big trade-off here. It's free, it's live, but it's 2D.
So trade-off. So David's, pointing out the one trade-off here that Meta is able to achieve right now, partnering with an external startup to do what NextVR did on its own at a higher quality with 3D, right? And the 3D matters, right? It's still cool to go courtside in 2D, but the leap of going from that half-court line experience to being inside the backboard happens when you get to 3D, and it gets even better when you can do volumetric 3D, when you can lean and have that comfort. And that's not even done. That's not even on the drawing board. What's the context is so there was a whole dip in the VR market that happened 2017 to 2019, where it was very clear that the numbers were just not adding helpfully enough to support a whole bunch of startups. And so NextVR laid off a whole bunch of their people going in 2019 to 2020, and then they got acquired by Apple. And so here we are today, where Apple is doing what NextVR did, but they're not spending the money that NextVR did to put the cameras in the places that the Quest headsets, the Quest people have now worked out. So this Quest partner has put the cameras in a bunch of the games and a bunch of the studios with this great 180 degree, but they're not doing it at 3D the way that NextVR does. Well, NextVR, so it's a 4-minute clip from NextVR of the All-Star Weekend, and one of the shots here in the NextVR video, a ball comes straight at you, and it basically would have hit the camera. If you've ever seen was a Dawson's Creek clip of a ball hitting the camera and then bouncing off, that's exactly what happens with this ball coming at you in VR. And the temptation would be to go like this, because it would be hitting you in the face. But it's all kind of lame, because this is an 8-month-old game you're watching. This is the All-Star Weekend months and months ago.
Yeah.
It's live. It's not, that live experience matters so much to so many people, of being able to call up their friend and say, "Did you just see that dunk? Oh my God!" Right? Like,
Or you can imagine, right, if Apple gets this live, your spatial persona beside each other, the same thing as that Stadium Meta app, but instead of your cartoonish Meta avatar, it's your spatial persona, and you've got your other spatial windows open at the same time potentially. One thing to nitpick, right? You say you keep saying this is Next VR, and you point out the history of this, but Next VR was acquired by Apple many years ago now, and there could be completely different teams not there and different kind of approaches. It's based on the technology, but this is Apple immersive video at this point, right? But where do you draw the line of where it becomes the acquired startup years ago and when it becomes an Apple venture?
Well, yeah, they acquired patents, and they acquired streaming technology that makes it hard for others to do what they're doing. Um, I've We have yet to video edit in VR, right? We're still at the early stages of video editing in VR. That's coming up here, right? But we've got this idea of how do you have an actual computer on your face. Next year, we put this in context of all our reporting. There's potential next year of Apple shipping a much less expensive headset. Let's say it's an Apple Vision at around 2000. Maybe it drops the eye cam, the external display, in order to cut cost, but everything else on that headset remains on par with the Pro. Let's say it's got all the resolution, it's got the eye tracked foveated rendering. Then you also combine that with Apple's pay-as-you-go plans, where you're paying a monthly fee for this headset. Then imagine them actually paying money for the camera placements on the next season of the NBA, or the next 2 seasons of the NBA, to do what Quest is doing with the NBA, but now at 3D, 180 degrees. And when you sign up when you get your headset, now you get access to 50 games live streamed in VR in this proper format. Then you go down to an Apple store and you go watch the 4-minute video of NextVR. And when you pull the headset off, the Apple rep says to you, "And are you a big NBA fan?" "Well, yeah, we've got 50 games this season that you can watch that way." That's the switch that is impossible right now. That's the sales pitch that nobody can make except in this reduced way right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you get to the point where this becomes more widespread, this clearly is going to be a huge part of the future of watching sports. Eventually, both Apple and Meta, and I'm sure Google, once they get into the game, want the ideal scenario that 5 or 10 years from now, every major sport for most major matches has a few of the seats reserved for these cameras in key positions, and that their headset owners can subscribe for whatever dollars a month and get these games. And that brings in a huge market of people who don't care about gaming. They just don't care. That's not what they're buying these headsets for. The kind of person who today, if they are going to buy a Vision headset at all, the kind of use cases they care about are the 3D movies, the giant cinema screen, the ability to have your Mac extended onto a giant monitor, those kind of spatial computing use cases. This brings in a huge number of people. I know people who have said, after I give them their VR demo, as soon as I can insert their favorite sport here in this, I absolutely will own one of these things. It's like, that is the use case they care about. And it's, as you say, there's on Meta's side, the issue is going to be, how do they get up to that partner the quality. And on Apple's side, it's going to be how do they get this to be live? Because I'm sure there are huge technical challenges to doing that in a production ready way that they're going to be solving through. But I'm sure they know this, right? That's what they're working on. Because as you say, right now, a 4-minute or 5-minute or whatever highlight clip of the Super Bowl or NBA, it's a novelty, it's a gimmick. But a live Super Bowl, that sells tens of millions of headsets eventually when they're affordable.
Well, I think we've covered our bases here. We've got our commenters really going off of this because I think we've made the point that no one else really makes about this technology. We've really cut it apart here on the opportunity for Apple, the opportunity for Meta. They're both heading in the same directions, right? Remember, Apple has a cash hoard that is astronomical that they can come out with at any given time and say, here's 1 billion for the NBA, 1 billion for the NHL, 1 billion for the NFL. They can go down the list and say, these are the people and resources we're going to throw at putting our camera technology into those seats to do this themselves. Meanwhile, Meta is partnering with all these other manufacturers to get headsets made because Meta is has to figure out how to beef up and get manufacturing up to the scale necessary to do what Apple has done for about a decade now.
I mean, my understanding is that when it comes to the NBA, this is a Meta funding through this partner. NBA describes Quest as the official VR headset of the NBA. That's a thing for 4 years now, and I don't imagine they did that at random, right? I'm assuming Meta gave them a giant check to get these 52 games at all. The other thing I would just point out before we leave this topic is that through this same Stadium app, you can actually, if you are an NBA League Pass subscriber, I may have not said the term correctly, but you can actually watch every NBA game live on a giant virtual screen using the same app. And you can watch, if that's your thing, up to 9 at a time and get, quickly switch between them and get all the stats and things like that. So as well as those 180 degrees, you get, if you're a subscriber, every one. And that is obviously coming through Meta's partnership with the NBA. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think Bosworth is an NBA fan, Meta CTO, and that may be why this is the first sport they're doing this for.
Yeah, great point. And yeah, even this, the picture, the multi-view way of watching a game is stellar and beyond anything you could have on a flat screen. Like you're talking putting picture in picture on a flat monitor that's 65 inches in order to watch two angles at once. And I mean, goodness, you make this as big as you want. This is already in and of itself better. You go up to 180 degree 2D. Arguably, that's better for a lot of situations. Then you go to 3D, then you go to volumetric. Like we're pointing out here, there is a path ahead to achieve all of these things. And when I'm pointing out the dollar amounts and people are laughing about it, right? It's a very, very hard issue to think about. How do we actually own all the technology to do this end to end? And how do we give tools to creators like you, the people who are buying the headsets, to go and make this content yourself? Like it's a holistic thing that you have to do at every layer in one way, shape, or form in order to get us there. Let's move on to the Apple section here, because this next subject here and the next few subjects point out the roadblocks here, and the roadblocks that are either going to come down or need to come down over time in order to do some of what we're talking about. So this first one here is Vimeo now has an Apple Vision Pro app, and it supports spatial video. So this is a bigger deal than it seems. Why, David? Because I've got a bunch of spatial videos that
Yeah, I mean, a huge problem we had was how on earth you actually could share those spatial videos. I remember when you captured some and you said, okay, I want to show you this. And you kind of sent it through Slack. And for some reason, when when you send them on your iPhone through the normal media sharing pipeline, it converts them away from being spatial videos. When I downloaded that on my Vision Pro, it didn't come up as a spatial video. Then we tried through iCloud, I believe, and even that still didn't come through as a spatial video. What on earth? And I don't think we tried AirDrop because obviously we're on different continents. But we've found already that Vimeo just worked, so that they now have a Vision Pro app. And as Ian said, they natively support spatial video, and that includes in the iOS app. So if you have an iPhone 16, any model, or one of the two iPhone 15 Pro models, you can capture a spatial video, go into the Vimeo app, upload it and just send someone a link, and they don't have to download on their end. They just stream it. So at the very least, it's a way to share. Kyle, UploadVR's Kyle, has an iPhone 15 Pro, I believe, and shared some spatial videos with me yesterday to test this, and it just worked. I'm in my Vision Pro, I'm in Slack, I see his message, I click it, the Vimeo app opens, and it instantly plays in 3D. And then if I try to open this same video on any other app, or any other device, sorry, it'll play in 2D. So, it's exactly what you'd expect. On Vision Pro, it plays in 3D. Any other device, 2D. Spatial is its add-on. You don't have to have it, and it's not like those old SBS videos where, if you didn't have the 3D display, you'd see like two halves. You could always do this on YouTube by converting it. You could get an app called Spatialify, for example, and convert to regular side-by-side 3D and then upload that to YouTube. But that's obviously an extra step. There's a little bit of quality loss there. And this is just natively supported. So it's good to see Vimeo be the first major platform to do this. And they're also Vimeo is funding a short film captured on spatial video called Currents, which is coming out on November 11th. We did ask Vimeo, are you going to release a Quest app so that Quest headsets can view these? And they gave a really generic answer along the lines of, we want to bring Vimeo to all of the devices we can style answer. So nothing concrete, but it wasn't a no either.
Yeah. And I saw that question. David just answered one of the questions in our audience asking specifically about that. I wouldn't say it's trivial, but once you put the video into Vimeo's servers, then it's up to them to serve it as intended to all the devices out there. So it's up to them to decide if, the file conversions are in there. If you have to be a pro subscriber to get those file conversions to get all the devices, or maybe they just do that for you to get it out there to all the devices. But the idea being, just like YouTube, right? Once you put it into their servers, it becomes a benefit for them to kind of get it out to as many people as possible.
Yeah, so people are asking about the kind of technical underlying aspect of bringing these to Quest. So people are asking, what is spatial video? So yeah, spatial video is an Apple profile for MVHEVC, multi-view HEVC, which itself is just an open, it's a part of the HEVC standard, which is licensed from the same organization as H.264, which is the most common codec for video online and has been for a long time now. So that Apple profile is open, so anyone who has the license for HEVC can implement Apple's. And Meta has done this on Quest through cloud conversion. So when you have the Meta Horizon iPhone app and you upload a spatial video that you've captured to your account to view on your Quest headset, Meta in the background converts that on their server to a side-by-side 3D format that the Quest headset can understand. Now, Pico have done an interesting thing, which is that they've implemented OS level support for spatial video. So you can not have to do that step. You could literally just copy a file to a Pico headset and have it natively be supported. It's possible Meta's working on that and plans to do that. Until Meta does that, for Vimeo to serve spatial videos uploaded in 3D to a Quest headset, they would have to do that same server-side conversion. But as Ian points out, YouTube already does this, Vimeo already does this. You give them a source video and they make a bunch of different quality and codec versions that they then serve out to users.
People asking, do people actually use Vimeo? I think you'll find a lot of filmmakers or otherwise indie people have their portfolios or other kinds of exploratory projects stored on Vimeo. And then it's been like an alternative to YouTube for a very, very long time, where you don't have to kind of be forced to look at the shorts that YouTube is trying to push you into. Like, it's not a socially focused program. It was all very much subscription based on your uploads. And so it built out a market for itself parallel to what YouTube did. But for that reason, you don't see those videos into your feeds a lot. It's because it's a very different sort of service.
Yeah, so the reason that this is significant for those kind of filmmakers and creatives that use Vimeo, and as you say, Ian, Vimeo has this model where instead of doing like these egregious ads and shorts that YouTube pushes, the creator themselves pays for when you want to have more than 1 gigabyte of videos in your channel. You pay a subscription. The reason that we could actually see some short films be made in spatial video and other kind of art projects is that soon they're going to be professional tools that allow creators to build spatial videos. Because right now, obviously, you capture them natively through your iPhone or the Vision Pro headset itself. But ideally, that's not how you want to do things. So uh, later this year, Canon plans to, and we've reported this in the past, launch a spatial lens for their EOS R7 camera. So this will attach to the front and allow it to natively capture spatial video. And this is through a collaboration with Apple. Of course, the problem then is that you don't just want to upload raw footage to a platform like this. You want to be able to edit it. And so Apple plans to add support for spatial video in Final Cut Pro, its video editing software on Mac, later this year too. So once you get that combination, you get a professional camera that can record natively in this format, and you get a editing tool that can edit it. And this is going to support all of the effects. So, if you add like a text effect, like you can see here, then that's actually being placed at a depth rather than just being like copied in both eyes. So it's 3D as well. And they say, other features of Final Cut Pro will be reworked to support spatial video. You can start to get creators making 3D content, short films and other kind of projects that people can watch on Vimeo and hopefully in future on other platforms as well.
If you're hearing music in the background, that means it's at the top of the hour and my clock has decided to go off. So sorry about that. The thing I wonder about, David, is if you shoot these streams, is it possible to get a flat angle really quickly out of the same camera and do double duty out of getting the immersive video, but also get a cut of the video that you you flip out to the normal broadcast channels very quickly? Is that possible? Because sorry, I've got another thought to add to that.
Yes, so that is one of the advantages of this MV-HEVC format that Apple has their Apple Spatial Video as a profile of. So it's actually a layer of the video. So if you try to play one of these videos on a regular device, as long as it supports HEVC, which almost every device on the planet does today, I'm pretty sure every serious major electronics device with a screen can do this, it will just play as a 2D video. And then the other eye, the other perspective is on top of it, will only be seen and used by devices that support this. So yeah, exactly as you say, and that's a big advantage over the side-by-side 3D format that was widespread before this and is still used today on other headsets commonly, where if you try to play that video on a regular device, you see these two separate eyes in the video, right? It's like a horizontal video with two sides being each eye. I'm sure enthusiasts in our comments who've worked with 3D video in the past will know what we're referring to. That is a huge advantage of this, that it is just 2D if you're not on a 3D device.
Yeah, and so think about that and think about the potential there. And I kind of outlined this to David before, and I don't know if I didn't express it well, but like I've done this job before. I've been on the sidelines of high school and college soccer or football games with a giant Canon camera with a telephoto lens, competing with the light coming into the stands, trying to get the exact action. And it's extraordinarily difficult, but there's a whole market of specialized professionals who invest $100,000, $200,000 in one lens that lets them get that diving photo. Well, this changes the whole. If you really have an audience of people who want to do what we're talking about in headset, you can imagine a scenario where you have 5 R7s all mounted around a sporting event. You have 5 of these cameras all on tripods, one at the 50-yard line, one behind the field goal, one at the corner, 2 more, and then you have a person in a Vision Pro headset getting the live streams from all of those cameras and clicking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and getting you the angles that you need to watch this game live, all done from a single person in a VR headset with an array of cameras around the field. Apple is building that ecosystem right now in real time, and we're seeing that being attempted right now. Like, there are people who are going to be attempting to do close to what I'm describing in the very near future.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can allow the user to switch between these views. I mean, relating back to what we were talking about before, and I just want to start by being clear to any viewers that may be somewhat confused. What we were talking about before, immersive video, which is 180 degrees, is different from spatial video, which we're talking about right now. What we're talking about right now is still rectangular video, not immersive, but it's three-dimensional. It's two different views in a rectangle floating in front of you. But yeah, it is interesting to think about, could the sports events we talked about before they do get 180-degree immersive, could they just get 3D, right? We looked at that view of the other capability of the Stadium app to show all of these perspectives. What if these were 3D? So you don't have to get these giant immersive cameras. You just have a spatial lens on an existing camera. That could be really impactful, especially the courtside views where you're close to the players. It's still good if you have this giant screen in front of you that's not perspective correct or immersive.
Effect when it's one-to-one scale with what your eyes actually see. So when the human walking towards you is a human and not becoming a giant, going back to the adult content that we talked about earlier in the show, you know what giants look like in VR if you've looked at any of that stuff. That's what looks like when you don't capture it correctly, as these latest cameras can do. Let's talk about this last subject, which I think is going to probably take, I guess there's two of them that are very related here. This is going to take us into the last section of discussion of our show. I thank you to everyone who's tuning in. Afro Badger saying that their real life got in the way of watching us for a little while, and they were upset about that. We thank you all for the amazing conversation we always get in this show, for tuning in, giving us your time, and as well as for our subscribers, members. Thank you. We encourage you to become a member on UploadVR.com first. That gives us the biggest sort of cut of the money that you put into us, and also removes ads from our site, so it's a more streamlined reading experience. And just thank you all for your support and for being on this journey with us. We try our very, very best to cut this down into the simplest terms so that we can help others get into VR. You can help others get into VR and navigate those difficult questions of, why do I go get the Apple Vision Pro demo? Do I just go get a Quest 3S? All of you, I think, have the answers to those questions because you watch this show. But let's talk about this last one, because I think there's been a lot of misreporting out there based on some of this news. And David did some of the best reporting I've seen in the world to break this down for our readers on why some of that analysis is wrong out there. So David, why don't you break it down for us?
Yeah, so this is a report that was picked up very widely, not only by us, but by general tech media, by general media, and then by, social media influencers who take a headline and try to find the most sensationalized way to present it that gets the most clicks and the most views. So we read the original report, and we've also been reading the contextual reports from the same outlet and others for years now to try to understand what's really going on here. So the headline news here is that Apple reportedly told its Vision Pro manufacturer that it may tell it to stop Vision Pro production later this year. Now, that may seem, if you don't understand the context here, of, Apple has given up on Vision Pro. They're going to stop selling Vision Pro. It's going off the market. It's a failure, right? So there's one important piece of context here to understand. Firstly, is that major electronic companies build up very large numbers of stock in advance. They don't typically, for these kind of products, do a just-in-time production where the unit you've got rolled off the assembly line a few hours or days ago, right? These are built up in warehouses for months and months and then sold to you in your local region. So according to this report, Apple has built up between 500 and 600,000 Vision Pro headsets to date, and that it expects will last it until it has the next Vision headset ready, which multiple sources have been reporting for a very long time now, as Ian alluded to earlier in the show, will land at somewhere around $2,000 with cheaper and lighter materials and without the eyesight display. But before we talk about that headset, let's again talk about Vision Pro, because the source of this report added their own speculation in that this may be due to weak sales. And that is a very popular narrative that, the sales are weak, so they're stopping production. Except that 500 to 600,000 number is exactly what this same source and the Financial Times, the Elec, supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, Bloomberg, and others said was the number of Vision Pros that Apple would produce in the first year before it launched. So the number of Vision Pros that all of these sources said was the number that Apple would produce in the first year is the number it is reportedly produced and is now stopping production. So you don't actually need to add in a peripheral reason for this happening, right? You don't need to have, it's due to weak sales and this idea that it was some sort of immediate reaction. And the underlying reason behind that being the number, according to all of these same sources, the same source that is talking about this supplier, this manufacturer being told to get ready to stop production, is that that's the number of near 4K micro OLED displays that Sony can make in its factory per year. And that is we've been talking about on this show for years now, even before Vision Pro was officially announced, is the limiting factor for not only the cost, but the scale. If you have something that can only be made in a small amount and is very expensive to make and has a low yield reportedly, that's how you get a product that's expensive, which is for two reasons. One, because the component's expensive, and other, because if you want to keep a product highly priced if you don't have a large enough supply. So the other context to this is that a couple of days ago, Tim Cook was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and as part of this, it covered his life and his career. He was asked about Apple Vision Pro, and he reiterated what he's been saying about this since before it launched. Some outlets have reported this as Tim Cook admits, Tim Cook backtracks. Those are really great words if you want to get clicks in a headline, but those are not accurate to what Cook really was saying here. So I'll read what he said when he was asked, firstly, he was asked, do you think Vision Pro is a success? And he basically said, yeah, from an ecosystem perspective, we're getting developers in here. The units are out there. Developers are working with it, figuring out how to, build the right apps. Then he was asked kind of more bluntly, but what about from a sales perspective? And he said, at $3,500, it's not a mass market product. Right now, it's an early adopter product. People who want to have tomorrow's technology today, that's who it's for. Fortunately, there's enough people who are in that camp that it's exciting. Now, sometimes I feel like I'm living in some sort of like parody of the technology information landscape, because that really shouldn't be a big revelation, right? A $3,500 product is an early adopter product that's a first generation of a new technology type that the company, of course they didn't expect this thing to be mass market at $3,500. It's crazy that needs to be said out loud. No, Apple didn't think Vision Pro was going to be a massive success at $3,500. Of course they didn't. But what was supposed to be a success, and arguably what is Vision OS, because that's the operating system that's going to go into the future Vision headsets that each year or each couple of years are going to get cheaper and lighter and thus more appealing as Vision OS itself evolves, right? We've got Vision OS 2 came out a month ago, and as we reported, dramatically improved the product and added a bunch of useful features and polished up a lot of the issues and kind of shot away at a lot of the pain points that we're having with Vision Pro. So let's get on to that next headset that all of these reports are saying are coming next year. And this same report, interestingly, said Apple has told a supplier to expect to build enough components for 4 million units of. So around 500,000 Vision Pros, and then 4 million of this next headset is what Apple's telling its supplier to get ready for. So you're talking about an increase of 8 times more wide appealing product. And as we've reported many times on this show before, I think we talked about it last week, according to these sources, roughly $2,000 takes out the EyeSight front display that shows your rendered eyes, uses cheaper and lighter materials like plastics to get the weight down, reportedly maybe even down to somewhere around 400 grams from 600 grams, and may use an A-series processor from iPhones instead of an M-series chip, which has multiple advantages. It means a lower power envelope, so you can use a smaller and cheaper battery potentially, or get more battery life out of the same size of battery. It also means it's a lower TDP chip, so it's putting out less heat, so you can have a less heavy and bulky cooling assembly. This thing has literally 2 cooling fans here to cool down the M2 with an A19. Could that be one lighter cooling fan with a less bulky heatsink? Again, all that brings down cost and weight. So we expect this headset to launch at some point in 2025. We don't know what the name's going to be. Ian speculated earlier on it could be Apple Vision Air, I think, or we don't know. Maybe you didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with Apple Vision. I think that makes a lot of sense at this point. And then an Air would be a lower profile device that gets maybe lacks a few features even beyond that. But I want to talk a little bit about content here, right? 4 million. If that's really the market that Apple's expecting, they can also bring their money to the developers to acquire for that platform a couple killer apps, a couple things to make you want to go and buy the thing. The one in my mind, that the pet project I want someone to fund for a headset is Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is a killer gaming experience for plenty of people out there, and it's not necessarily going to be the people in this audience who are really into active VR games, but it's still inarguably one of the biggest gaming properties in the world, and its AR is absolutely miserable. No one uses it on phones in any way, shape, or form because it's that miserable of experience. When you start talking about 4 million headsets, you start talking about the market that could actually start to appeal to those kinds of games or those types of properties. Or you start talking about the people that you want to get butts in seats, virtual seats, right, into NBA games, NFL games. And there's still a path beyond that, right? If you go down to 1,000 or 1,500, that's when you start getting to like Vision Air, maybe, I think, prices, or even that market where you're starting to replace an iPhone with a head-mounted display, and then you're talking tens of millions of Apple devices. And yeah, Gigo and saying, I don't think the Vision Pro audience plays Pokemon. I do. I'm going to speak for those people, and you're right. But I'm not talking about the Vision Pro audience, am I? I'm talking about a different audience, the same audience that Tim Cook is saying the Vision Pro is not appealing to right now. The early adopting audience is who the Vision Pro is appealing to now. So yeah, a lot of people, I think, saw Pro as the dev kit that it is, disguised as an early access product.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both, right? It is a dev kit. Sure, that's a huge reason, but it is also a valid early access product, right? There are people who are using this thing. It is a device that has uses, right? The biggest problem is its cost, right? But the other big problem is the weight. But there are people who are okay with that. There are, just like you can get for your Quest third-party straps, there are people that put third-party straps on their Vision Pro to make it comfortable. The big question, I think, is whether with the next headset, they're still going to be focusing on these same use cases, which are very different than what Quest is used for, or if they will try to attack into those same Quest use cases. I suspect it'll be the former, right? There is this narrative constructed that Vision and Quest are these huge competitors, but while Quest is attacking Vision's use cases recently, right? You've seen Amazon Prime Video arrive with downloads, and we have flight mode that arrived months and months ago, and spatial computing with bringing floating monitors. Vision Pro is still very focused, and Vision OS, on that same core use case of being a portable giant cinema and monitor. There are some developers that are building like immersive apps that do more than that, but I suspect that's still not the main use case of this thing. It still comes back to what I said in my Vision Pro review, that this Steve Jobs quote from 2005, where he talked about the idea that one day in the future you could develop a product that would be headphones for the eyes. That still seems like what Vision Pro is focused on, and I suspect the cheaper model will still be that focus, except cheaper, lighter, and with some big improvements in Vision OS 3 that make it better.
Yep. Sorry for the fake out on the end of the show earlier. I think that we got to call out that we had robotic voices for a little bit. I don't know if the robotic voices cut out some of the context, but yeah, we had that last little section of the show. I appreciate the context there in our audience arguing about the market feasibility of this. I do want to say that, like, headsets on planes, trains, buses, it's still a rarity, and I don't think it's a rarity only because of the social discomfort. I think it's a rarity because of a lot of the things our commenters are talking about, apps, and integration with your existing pipelines. Those things are still severely lacking, even on Apple Vision Pro and on MetaQuest, even with multitasking, HDMI link. These are still just the beginning, early days of letting you do actual computing inside of your VR headset. And I think the social anxiety that comes with some of those things, I think, is a little bit overblown. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you're not going to be walking down the street in them for a while, but when more of your computer is inside of your headset, it becomes less unnatural to do that. And I wonder about, like, David, will we see more VR-based mixed reality devices? Like, are we going to get the all-day AR glasses that give you 50-degree fields of view, or are we going to get 100-degree field of view mixed reality headsets walking around in numbers? Like, I don't know. I don't know what that timeline looks like. That's why there's so much confusion and argumentation in this audience, is it seems so darn absurd to imagine this, even though, like, the watchers of this industry, the people who are watching this audience, know about that software gap that's still there.
I think we're far off either of those features. I still think that for the majority of use cases, vision headsets will be for the foreseeable future, especially as long as Apple decides to go with the included tethered battery, will be for sitting down. Like, the majority of use case of this product, I think a lot of people are going to see these things for the first time on a flight. I use Vision Pro on quite a lot of flights now. Nobody cared, to be honest. Like, there's this idea that, oh, people are going to care. Nobody cared. I just put it on like other people put their headphones on and watch their iPad. You just, right, like, a lot of these things are more in people's minds of worries of what might happen than what really does happen. With Quest, it's only really become practical recently with Amazon Prime Video because it has downloads. Of course, if you are not someone that wants to use the legal methods of content, there are ways around that. As we've seen people talk about, you can obviously just sideload video files onto your Quest, but for most consumers, that's not the way that they get these content. You need to eventually have Netflix. On Vision Pro, the great thing is you have Disney Plus. My most used app on Vision Pro is probably Disney Plus. Again, it's such a different device for me than the Quest that I'm using for this, like, room scale gaming content with track controllers, whereas on a Vision Pro, I'm sitting on a flight watching 3D Disney Plus. It's just such a different use case. And yes, Meta's attacking it, but even with Prime Video, there's no 3D content. They don't have Disney Plus. They don't have their own movie rental service like Apple does. Still very, very different markets for now.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably it for our show now. For real here, I want to leave on this note that if you've got an Apple Vision Pro, go watch Submerged. Go watch the NBA video. If you've got a Quest, go play Arkham Shadow as soon as you possibly can. Go check out Maestro over on hand tracking and see the future of hand tracking, and realize that you are using, if you're using either of those devices, you're using two ends of the same computing platform. VR headsets with mixed reality capabilities, and the future is in your hands. You're using it. You're already in the right place. Appreciate you being on this journey with us. And I appreciate the lack of negativity on a lot of these things in our audience. Like, a lot of the discussion out there, like, that's what drives engagement in social media is, but you're wrong, is being the easiest way to spark a conversation. And here we've got two of the biggest technology companies in the United States agreeing on the future. So we thank you for your time. We'll see you on Tuesday with VR Gamescast and Don Hopper. And then we'll be back at 9 a.m. Pacific with David Heaney and VR Download next Thursday. We'll see you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Again, I'll echo what Ian said. Really high quality discussion in the comments. We really appreciate it, as always. And yeah, please join us again next week to talk about the future of computing.